Hello, my name is Ian Price.
And I'm Steve Madsen.
We are the designers behind Downbelow, a role-playing game which is supported by you through Patreon.
Yep, that's the long and the short of it right now, and that's really what we're here to talk about.
The idea of the game, as stated on the page, is that the world is a little ways into the future, and things look great to most people.
Isn't that always the case? The working themes behind it, the inspiration for the whole thing, was the simple concept of cyberpunk noir. It's very easy to see cyberpunk and film noir as honestly two sides of the same coin, just set in different times of development. But there's not a lot of work actually bridging these two inspirations together, which is odd, seeing as some of the seminal work of cyberpunk is functionally indistinguishable from film noir, especially visually. If you look at something along the lines of Blade Runner, not so much the original Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, but Blade Runner itself, you see very distinct film noir visual and emotional cues to it, which is why it's surprising that these days cyberpunk largely just refers to trench coats and katanas as far as gamers are concerned. No offense, but that's the perception there.
So, our objective was to focus things onto the ideas that are underlying the settings, once again, rather than the tropes that have come to be associated with the type of setting in role-playing games. So, a back to basics, back to the core concept approach. And along with that, we've got a set of rules that allow us to have players and GMs express their story together and entirely by a shared choice, rather than the typical method of game storytelling, which relies on some random element, usually dice, sometimes cards, sometimes rock, paper, scissors. But we decided that we would rather put all of the choice on the players and the GM and provide a framework for having dramatic tension despite the fact that the outcome is actually chosen by the players and GM as it goes along.
Mechanically, there's actually a lot of reasons for this, and it's not just a simple narrative choice. If you've played role-playing games before, or even if you've heard stories about them, hi, I know there's probably plenty of you that read play reports online. I'm a fan of several myself, but that's neither here nor there. You'll know that it's actually very, very easy for people to get caught up in their stuff. Digression into personal experience here. I am a longtime Shadowrun player. And one thing that I noticed, not just in my own games, whether I've been running them or playing them, but in a lot of different games that I've read the reports about, it's very easy, very straightforward, and seems to almost always happen that before too long, sight of what the game is supposed to be about is lost in the quest for building the perfect attack helicopter, in the quest for finding the perfect futuristic katana, in the quest for, wait a minute, this gun does 15 damage. And it's very easy to get caught up in stuff. And cyberpunk culture really hasn't helped with that, seeing as a lot of it's been informed by both role-playing and video games. A lot of it has been informed by the idea that this is, in most respects, a dungeon-crawling adventure through more of an urban landscape where people wear body armor and shoot guns instead of swinging swords, and he who has the coolest armored trench coat wins. We wanted to get away from having lists full of cool stuff and get more into doing things based around the characters you encounter, the dilemmas you encounter, and the situations you find yourself in. Again, look less towards the Matrix and more towards the Maltese Falcon.
So, in pursuit of that, where should we be going with tools to give players and GMs? Because we've got a lot of work to set up here. We still have some things that we're working out with the system. For example, some of our play tests have gone fairly well, but it is difficult to set something up that allows people to choose their own adventure.
Between you and me, whoa, camera, there you go. Between you and me, it's actually very difficult to convince players that it's a good idea to fail frequently without some sort of back and forth incentive.
Honestly, the way that it actually works from the perspective of a storyteller and the perspective of a player, although it's harder to feel this as a player, you don't care about your victories as much unless they were difficult to obtain. So one of the core conceits of the system is that people have to fail in order to succeed.
And there again, you'll see this. Those of you who have experienced role-playing gaming before, you guys will see this. The reason that people complain about Monty Hall campaigns is not because they get cool stuff. Who doesn't like cool stuff? It's because they just get cool stuff for no real trade-off. They just waltz in, and they do just walk into Mordor and walk out with a cool new set of +5 armor.
Which is the whole reason that, speaking of Monty Hall and the person, Monty Hall, Let's Make a Deal didn't last nearly as long as, say, Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy, or The Price is Right, which are all still on the air now, 30-plus years later, whereas Let's Make a Deal is gone, because Let's Make a Deal had no real content to it. But Jeopardy, there's new trivia coming around all the time. There's way too much information in the world now. And Wheel of Fortune, there's an actual element of skill to spelling out the words along with the chance of spinning the wheel. Price is Right, they've added a few new games, and there's a whole bunch of different chance and skill-based games that they do on that one. So it's more engaging, and it's engaging to watch the people maybe win the money, because a lot of them don't win the money.
So, we asked the question about where do we want to go with tools. Actually, since this is the first video, I think we should talk a little bit about what we do want to do, and the term tools is actually very important there. See,
and when we're talking about tools, we're not talking about things that characters carry with them. We're talking about things that players and GMs use to set up the game.
Exactly. And that's actually, there's a lot that we could talk about this, but one of the things I am going to mention straight up front is just the simple concept that when we're making this game, we're not making a static setting. The setting will be part of it. There's a lot to talk about there. There is a setting in mind, a default setting, as well as a world setting to expand on further, but it's really not about that. The tools we present using this setting as a framing device, and as a totally playable framing device, mind you. We're in no way trying to say that the information we give you as a setting is just information about how to build your own. We want you to play in this setting. It's not just a private playground. It's not just a developer's toolbox. But what we really want to give you is the tools to tell this type of story in whatever setting you designed, and then the tools to design said setting as well.
Exactly. We want to not only give you the city of Nuevo Paradiso and the Yggdrasil space elevator. We want to not only give you the other cities and their own down-below economies, whether it be Chicago or LaGrange City, whether it be on Earth or on Mars or maybe on one of the extrasolar colonies. Because we have talked about there being these Tannhauser gates that are wormhole gates to other star systems that, in the context of a Nuevo Paradiso-based game, basically represent if you manage to get there, you're gone, you're out, you have reached your culmination. And maybe they represent something else if you're running the game in a different way. We want to present you with options for running in various different parts of our setting, whether it be the default city of Nuevo Paradiso, or we want to expand to have many other options, like setting a game on a colony ship, heading for the extrasolar colonies, might be one thing that we do later. But we want, as we present these things, to also, almost like Marxist theater, show you what we are building them out of, show you what the purpose in the narrative of each of these things is, so that you, whether you are a player or a GM, can then put those things together in your own way, take them apart, rearrange them, fit them together in new ways, and build your own structures, build your own narratives, build your own fluffy bunnies out of them.
Careful with the fluffy bunnies. You build too many fluffy bunnies and they will start building themselves. It's not always a good situation.
There's nothing weird about walking your bun around on a leash.
Yes, for those of you who didn't catch that reference, we're both playing Undertale right now, and there are occasionally some small times when Downbelow and Undertale, just because of the words, will get mixed up. Don't worry, it's normal.
Also because it's normal to take inspiration for your creative outputs from whatever creative inputs you're getting at the moment.
So since we're here, since this is the first time, let's talk Genesis. And I don't mean in the beginning there was God created the heaven and earth. That may or may not be true. We're not going to deal with religion at this point in time. That is a subject for another video. Let's talk about the genesis of Downbelow and where it came from. This whole idea, this whole thing, really sprung from call it a one-shot. It's more than just a one-off adventure, because the idea was, for our weekly gaming group, what we do is we don't have a single set storyteller, set showrunner. What we do is we basically pitch to the group a concept for a mini-series, if you will. In television terms, this would be a single season of an anime in which you tell a complete connected story. This would be Firefly. This would be a season of Battlestar Galactica.
What Firefly ended up being.
Well, even if Firefly had gotten the second half of their first season, this would be a season of Firefly.
Yeah. The season we ended up getting of the BattleTech cartoon back in the 90s.
But essentially what we do is we pitch a mini-series to the group. There's a vote, there's a popularity contest, and the strongest idea takes it.
Because we have a bunch of people who want to do different things, and we are two of them.
And more importantly, there are too many games for any gaming group to explore in the classical sense. The classical sense, handed down to us from Saints Gygax and Onison, is the idea that this is the DM, and he runs his game, and it lasts forever. Pardon the pause in there. You can
and
fill
you
in
play
whatever
every
you want.
week, one night a week for like 4 hours.
4 to 8 to 12 to however many hours your group plays, and it lasts for 8 years, and people get tense unless the GM is really on the ball, and there's drama and fallout, and then you have to reconstruct a new, more different gaming group to try a different game. The traditional structure works, but it's really only the traditional structure because we haven't grown out of it. This is one of our attempts to grow out of it, because too many games, we didn't want there to be any drama when person A wants to play a certain game and person B wants to play another game. There's actually no need to fight. Running a series of short-run games does have its drawbacks. Mainly, people will get attached to the characters they play in one game and want to go on.
So
but we're digressing.
In any case, the point is that we came up with, specifically Steve came up with, the Yggdrasil Corporation, Nuevo Paradiso, and the entire core setting that Downbelow is based on for a short-run game.
A lot of the ideas in
for this group.
A lot of the ideas in it are actually initially very specifically to address specific player problems. And I'm mentioning this. It feels like almost a downer, aggressive note to start on, but it's actually incredibly important. The extrasolar colonies were invented because there was, at that point, a problem player in the group who had a massive authority complex, wanted unearned authority at every turn, and this player basically would insert themselves into a military or civilian authority role whenever possible, and expect people to follow their lead just because they had the title. The extrasolar colonies were invented so that I could say, there is actually no space navy. No, you can't be an admiral. Similarly, the worldwide general peace was invented so that I could point at this player and say, no, you can't be a colonel in the armed forces. No, you can't be an ace fighter pilot. There are no wars. Okay, it's grown beyond that, but there's some of that in there. The lack of equipment lists was there. We have a player who absolutely adores cobbling together absurd lists of daisy-chained equipment, and will gladly spend the entire game session nose deep in a book, and when pulled out, will look around shocked and say, "What's going on again?" Right in the middle of an intense negotiation scene. So, lack of equipment lists was born to say, no, you can't do this. You can't fall into that trap. The noir attitude was born. The whole thing about the noir attitude was born because, frankly, a large portion of the group was what can be described as rootless, shiftless murder hobos. They like to fight things. They like to move on. They haven't realized that there's a lot of stories that aren't conveniently solved by pouring withering fire downrange. They haven't, and so the idea behind film noir is, if a problem is solved with a bullet, it will be a single bullet fired out of regret on a dark bridge with an inconclusive outcome, not a triumphant hail of cinematic gunfire.
And on the, well, if it is, then it's going to be interspersed with doves taking flight, and your character probably dies because you're giant fat, and this is the killer. But
there are exceptions to every rule.
Because John Woo does noir in a way that people in Hollywood don't. But
the reason I mention all of this is to explain that nothing here happened in a vacuum. And dissatisfaction is actually a major theme of Downbelow.
And on the system side of things, there were also specific tendencies. And it should be noted that some of the player tendencies that we've been working to write to deal with and take something bad and turn it into something good are ones that we've observed in other people's groups, not just in our own as well. Some of the things that have already been mentioned, although they're present in people in our groups, they're actually pretty well managed in the players that we play with, but we foresee ways that they can be problems, and so on.
Most importantly, this isn't actually a passive-aggressive screed against our players. It's very
we
easy
love
to
our
take,
players. Hi, guys.
It's very easy to take this as such, because here I am, sitting here, opening up by talking about problems. Talking about problems is a major theme of Downbelow. We're going to get there, I promise. But we're actually, in any role-playing group, it's actually very easy to deal with problems.
Mm-hmm.
And it's as easy as saying, oh, hello, we have 5 players here, and this one is a problem? You're out of the group. Easiest way to deal with problems. Boom, gone. Done.
Yeah, if
that
they're-
is not a problem.
If they're a problem and they're not willing to be an adult and a good friend and actually work it out, then just, yeah.
So
The problem can go away. We live in a world in which it is possible to find people who want to play with you who are not jerks.
So all of the talk about player so-and-so had problem thus and such is actually me expressing this is conflict. This is real-life conflict, and from conflict comes story. And from dissatisfaction comes drama of the good kind. And from drama comes resolution, and here we are at the end of all of this with a game to present to you.
And that's, just to close out our recording for this week, that's also where the inspiration for the system came from, because from conflict comes drama. Well, I, as a GM, had a conflict with randomness. I've had various different player complaints and my own personal suffering come out of random systems. There's the player who is always complaining about failing dice rolls. The dice never roll well for me. I have such terrible luck, and it gets really tiresome to listen to that.
Incredibly, especially when you can point out to said player, really, you're standard deviating all over the place.
yeah.
You're just fixating on the highs and lows.
And
Especially the lows.
And mostly on the lows, because creative people tend to have anxiety and depression problems, which is another issue for another time, but will also be touched on in Downbelow, because it's kind of one of those core issues. And then there's the players who they might not even realize that they're doing it, but they fudge their results. They report not what they actually rolled. They cheat in various small ways and sometimes even large ways, because they get so attached to the idea of what they're doing that they can't abide by the action that they described that they really wanted to have their character do, not going through the way that they pictured it.
And there's even more. There's the people who get so accustomed to having high numbers that they'll complain they only beat the difficulty by 50 this time. Ugh, it's a horrible roll.
Mm-hmm.
You needed to hit the difficulty.
Let alone the people who have problems with, my character actually took damage, oh no, they might die, when that's on the table to begin with. So the system boils down to, you can choose to succeed or fail, and in the current iteration, you get X number of times you can choose to succeed, and the GM is supposed to present you with X plus at least something times that the group will need to choose whether to succeed or fail, so that everybody in the group will have opportunities where they can choose to succeed now, but if you choose to succeed now at the start of the session, you know that later there may come a time when you have taken the choice away from yourself, and now you can't choose to succeed. This is the time when your character fails. Or you can choose earlier on, okay, I will fail to save this innocent bystander because later on I may need the chance to say, I shoot the guy before he shoots to save something even more important to me.
As you might have seen, it's a work in progress. There are problems with this simplistic system. The basic idea, though, is going to stand. The basic idea that everything is player-facing, everything is out in the open, and everything is a joint agreement, effectively, between the different actors in the scene, it's going to require investment. This is not D&D. D&D is a wonderful game and one of my all-time favorites. D&D is also the perfect example of a game where one person has to know the rules and everyone else can just show up, throw some dice, and sleep through it, and a great time is had for all. The best games of my life, some of them have been D&D.
And in
The worst games of my life, most of them have been D&D.
and in D&D, you can end up winning all the time.
Yeah.
In Downbelow, we are attempting to strike a balance, and this is where it becomes difficult for us, between, on the one hand, you can choose to succeed or fail, but on the other hand, basically, well, excuse me, I actually completely screwed up that sentence. Starting over. On the one hand, you know how many times you're going to succeed or fail. And that is the simple part of the system. But on the other hand, putting enough depth into the mechanism by which you make that choice so that it's not obvious and why even bother playing it out, so that there is that tension. We want to create a tension between these two things, between the known success and failure and the unknown whatever, and some kind of unknown tension factor, the unknown loss factor. And creating tension between that is, that's where we have the most difficulty right now. That's what we're continuing to playtest with the system, and that is going to be what we're striving for.
Okay, before we sign out, we've been talking a lot. It's time for some interactivity. Homework. Before next time, watch one of the following 3 movies. Blade Runner, The Maltese Falcon, Treasure of the Sierra Madre. Yes, I know that some of them don't seem obvious, but yes, we're also starting with the easy ones.
Acceptable alternative, play a round of the board game Android by Fantasy Flight Games, which is a more recent inspiration.
Also, read. Get your hands on a copy of Neuromancer. Neuromancer is quite possibly the seminal cyberpunk narrative. It's also very close to noir. This is not a story about someone who is a player character in a standard modern role-playing game. This is about someone who is forced with all sorts of very, very suboptimal decisions and has to make the dramatic best of all of them. Gibson's writing stands up to the test of time if you ignore anything he says about numbers. Yeah, try to put all of that stuff about 1K of RAM costing thousands of dollars out of your head. Just let the numbers flow and the story holds. So that's your homework. We'll have more next time.
We will be doing the same, and we will start our discussion off on some points related to that. And if you have any questions, remember to send them in to the Patreon, and we will try to answer your questions about the setting and the system.
Until next time, it's a lovely day.
Somewhere.